For science, we're doing a project that involves us being a genetic counselor to two fictional characters named Marc and Leila. So essentially, both parents have diseases and they want to find out the chance that their child will have at being healthy. So to do this, we're going to need to look at the evidence and use two tools called Punnett squares and pedigrees. So essentially, they come into the office one day and uh, we they talk to us about like what chance their child is going to have at having a disease. So I went through and I highlighted all the important evidence, like the history of the disease in their family, and that's going to help us decipher what disease they're gonna have, or what chance the child is going to have at the disease. So we're going to be using this by using a pedigree. So essentially what a pedigree is it's like a fancier version of a family tree. It can track diseases through families. So in this pedigree, the key says that the whited out people are the ones with albinism, which is a genetic disease. So essentially, you can see how the genetic disease is going in through the family trees and which people are being affected by it. So you can use this to kind of look at traits, and you can use logic and reasoning to kind of decipher, oh, which person has that. So we can use a pedigree to kind of determine which people have the disease, which it's used to track symptoms essentially. So when we do that, we can use these things called Punnett squares. Now, Punnett squares are a combination of two genotypes. Genotypes are basically a word for the two traits that a person has. One comes from the mom and one comes from the dad. So you can see here that let's use the top two letters as the dad and the side letters as the mom. Uh, the genotype for the dad is capital A, lowercase a. The capital stands for it's standing for dominant, and the lowercase is standing for recessive. Now, when these two combine in the square, that will have these four squares are the genotypes for the genotype possibilities of their offspring. Um, so if you look at the different letters, the different combinations of the letters are going to result in different symptoms. So, for example, capital A will result in the dominant gene. However, if there's a capital A and a lowercase a, the capital one always wins. Dominant traits rather, will always show over recessive traits. So the only way for a recessive trait to show is if it's double recessive, and we can use that to kind of decipher what people have what disease. But here's an explanation of the basic symptoms for Tay-Sachs and Huntington's. So let's start off with Tay-Sachs here. The most common form of Tay-Sachs is one that has extreme symptoms early on into infancy and childhood. Many symptoms include seizures, sensitivity to light, and loss of physical capability and senses. The list goes on, and it's very likely that if you have this type of Tay-Sachs, you won't live past infancy. The only way to get this disease is through genetically inheriting it. So that's the most common type of Tay-Sachs, and it's the type that we see here in Marc's family. So here's the source. It's from Reliable, and it'll be in the description of the video. Now, the explanation for Huntington's here is it happens later on in life when you're an adult. Symptoms include chorea, which is jerking and moving suddenly, trouble doing tasks such as walking, breathing, and swallowing, and an increased rate of seizures. Symptoms get worse after showing, with life expectancy after first symptoms being 15 to 20 years at most. And the only way to get Huntington's is to inherit it. So Tay-Sachs is recessive, and Huntington's is dominant. So we're going to be starting off with the key for pedigrees. So the first thing that you want to know is the different genders. So that equals female, the circle, and the square is a male. Now also what you want to know is that colored is disease ridden, the person is carrying the disease and it has been afflicted with it, and then white is healthy. The other thing that you need to know is there's different generations, so it counts from like the bottom. So that's the first generation, that's the second generation, that's the third generation. These are the kids, these are the parents, these are the grandparents. And they're marked by like, so say for example, we can kind of draw a little path like this. So the male and the female, and then they have offspring. Say that's a male right there. So this is generation 1, that's generation 2. So Leila has Huntington's. So this is from the information that we're given from the article. This is how the pedigree is gonna look. Alright, so he has the disease and she has the disease. So essentially, this is dominant, so that we know that at least this one, they have to be carrying the disease here. So she has to be at least this, and because they're not carrying the disease, they're recessive automatically. But we don't know. He could be heterozygous or he could be homozygous for Huntington's. So essentially, she could also be heterozygous or homozygous. And so the Punnett square for her would be like this. But we can get more into that later. So that's Leila's pedigree. So Mark gave us a little bit more info. He showed us his grandparents. Well, like a lot more of his grandparents, I guess. So that's Mark. So based off the information he gave us, this is all we know. So he has Tay-Sachs, kills off very early, so pretty sure both of these two are dead. But we can tell already that these two have recessive genes. So basically because this is homozygous recessive, we know that one of these two parents has to be a carrier. And we also know that they're both carriers. Actually, we both know that they're not homozygous, because if they're homozygous, then they would have the disease, but they don't have the disease. So if, say for example, one of them was homozygous and one of them was both dominant, then they wouldn't be able to have the child, because you need at least you need one recessive in each one. So because this one has the disease, we know that they're both heterozygous. So the Punnett square for Mark is gonna look like this, just heterozygous on each side. Alright, so for Lila's Punnett square, she has one dominant, one heterozygous and one homozygous recessive. So if we combine these, you can see that it's going to be 50% for having it or not having it. Because these two are both homozygous recessive, these two are both heterozygous. So because Huntington's is dominant, this one is automatically going to have the disease. So she has a 50-50 chance at testing positive for Huntington's because she doesn't know if she has Huntington's or not. So now if we look at Marc's chart, Marc's Punnett square here, he has two heterozygous parents for Tay-Sachs. So 75% of the time he's going to be healthy, because all he needs is one dominant to be healthy, and 25% of the time he's going to have a disease. So he already knows that he is healthy because he has not died in an early age, which is what Tay-Sachs does to you. It's pretty much always lethal, so we know that he's healthy. Alright, so next off we're going to be finding out the genotype for the child.
So Marc can either be homozygous dominant or heterozygous, because he has to be healthy. And there's a 50% chance for this, and a 25% chance for this. Let's see. And then Leila can either have both, but it's generally they have homozygous dominant. That is the majority of people, so we're just going to have to stick with that. So for this, it's just going to be a 100% chance of healthy, because it's just all capital T's here. It's still going to be 100% healthy here. However, the child has a 50% chance to become the carrier.
We're going to have the possibility for Huntington's here. And so essentially, Leila may have it, or she may not have it from our Punnett square earlier. However, Marc has tested negative for Huntington's. So that means that because Huntington's is a dominant genetic disease, he's going to have to be homozygous recessive or else he'd have it. So this makes these Punnett squares pretty simple here, where we can see this is a 50% chance to be healthy, or a 50% chance to be unhealthy. Now for this one, it's going to be all lowercase recessive because there's nothing else. So essentially it's a 100% chance if Leila's healthy. Okay, so to explain that more precisely, the Punnett square right here determined that these two, the chance between this and the chance between that is a 50-50 for each one. So assuming that she's going to be unhealthy, you'd have to go to this chart because this is a 100% chance that the child is going to be healthy. So in here, in this 50% chance, what you're going to want to, what this is going to have is going to have another 50% chance here to be unhealthy. So there's a 50% chance inside this Punnett square, and there's a 50% chance overall for Leila to have the Huntington's. So essentially, the 0.5% chance here and the 0.5% chance just overall is going to equal 1/4 or 25%. So my recommendation to Marc and Leila would be to have the child, because there's only a 25% chance that the child will have Huntington's. And since that's Huntington's usually happens later in life, and since it's such a low number, it's going to be it's pretty you have a fair chance at being able to have the child without it being unhealthy. However, if if Lila tested for it and she proved to be negative, if she proved to be positive, the child would have a 50% chance, and if she tested negative for Huntington's, then the child would have a 100% chance of being healthy. So just to kind of pin it down, Lila can also be tested for it. But I think overall, there's a very low chance that the child will have Huntington's. However, Tay-Sachs is completely out of the picture. Tay-Sachs is you have a 0% chance to have Tay-Sachs because it's very likely that Lila will have homozygous dominant for Tay-Sachs. So yes, I would definitely recommend having the child or even adopting because it's going to be a pretty low chance at being an unhealthy child.